Tonight, heroic Imperial forces succeed in halting a cowardly insurgency on the resource-rich Imperial planet of Mimban.
And we've confirmed that the destruction of an Imperial prison facility on Coruscant was indeed the work of rebel terrorists. The Emperor will be live with comment about this barbarous attack at 11. Welcome back, loyal galactic citizens, to another episode of Hoth Topics. I am a brother of the Inquisition, Ian, and joining me this week, as he does every week, is a commander in the 7th Imperial Fleet, John. John, how are you doing today?
In the words of our friends in the Bay Area, hella tired.
Hella tired. Hella tired. So, you're perfectly in the mindset for me to be asking you a bunch of questions.
It's no different than any other episode of Hot Topics.
That's
where we put quality above
sleep.
Other words. Other adjectives, nouns. I don't know. I'm tired.
Verbs, probably, too.
Yeah, no.
No? We don't put it above verbs?
No. Verbs are number one.
Verbs are number one. Well, John, I gotta tell you, man, I have been in a very Imperial-centric mood lately.
Good.
There are a couple reasons behind this. First off, I have started reading the second Thrawn novel, Thrawn Alliances, and Thrawn is, as we've both discussed before, and probably will more today, an amazing character, and I've been very much enjoying it. I'm not done with it yet. And I also recently picked up the Marvel regular issue Star Wars comic, the second collected volume. That's got a really cool Stormtrooper.
Yep.
Oh yeah, the Stormtroopers.
It's the new Stormtroopers they're going to be introducing in Episode 9. The
Stormtroopers. The new Stormtrooper. There's a new Stormtrooper.
Are you having a hard time?
I can't not hear Stormtrooper now. It sounds like some sort of strudel. A new squad. Thank you. Called Scar Squadron, and they're super cool and specialized. There's a lot of Vader going on, and I was actually rereading the Vader comic before I started in on that one. And I've been playing a lot of Battlefront 2, and getting to play the Empire is always fun in that. So I'm in a very Imperial-centric mood, which is a rare occurrence for me. And I thought, why not today use this opportunity to talk to you about the Empire and kind of what you love and just love, I guess, about it, because you don't really dislike much about it, as you remind me on several podcasts. You are a self-proclaimed Imperial fanboy, is that correct?
Yes.
Probably. So I thought today we'd kind of talk about the Empire itself, kind of how it became such a popular phenomenon in pop culture, as it is, what we like about it, what we dislike about it, and maybe go over, at the end of all of this, some mail that we got. Oh, another thing that put me in an Imperial mood is I made a very poor purchasing decision and got an Imperial Shock Trooper Black Series helmet, which looks very nice.
It's a GameStop exclusive one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for Battlefront 2, which is a game that I am slowly coming to enjoy more and more. Like, I wasn't really into it after I bought it, and now that it's kind of been out for a while and they've fixed some things and are moving forward with releasing content, I'm
like the Droidicas?
Yeah, like those things that aren't happening.
Oh.
But I gotta tell you, I'm starting to enjoy the game more. And I know you play it on PS4, right?
Yes, but I don't have a PlayStation Network account, so I only play against bots, and it's not nearly as fun. I enjoyed the single player until it was obnoxiously short, because single player is a feature now on video games.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can get it across to people that we enjoy more single-player experiences, as well as multiplayer experiences. It's okay to have both, and it's okay to do one or the other. You just gotta have a healthy combination. At least that's my opinion. You being the Imperial-centric one of us, I kind of had a couple questions that I'm kind of curious about. What drew you to the Empire in the first place? Like, what made you the big fan of them that you are today, and the person that will constantly spout Imperial rhetoric at me whenever I dare say anything about Rebels or Jedi?
Well, as you may expect, it all goes back to watching Star Wars. Oh,
I don't believe you.
When I mentioned several times that my first experience watching Star Wars was in reverse order. I saw Jedi, Empire, then New Hope. While watching them at my friend's house, we always had a giant pile of Legos in the middle, and we tried to build the ships that we saw. And the Imperial vehicles and ships are just easier to make because they're a lot more simple designed.
Right.
Where like a Y-wing and an X-wing has very like specific kind of curves that are hard to do with mid-90s Legos. Where a TIE fighter is just square wings with a square center, basically. If you're making a very simple Lego version. Then AT-ATs are just giant boxes. AT-STs are boxes with slightly less legs. That's pretty much what drew me into, is that they were easier to make, so they were easier to, play with, like create stories with.
John, based on this story you're telling me, I don't think you're a fan of the Empire. I just think you're a fan of boxes.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I'm a fan of boxes.
I understand the Lego thing, too, because I think I was really big into Legos as well as a kid, and it was around the era. I started getting the Star Wars ones around like the Clone Wars era. Mm. So I got a lot of the clones, the sort of the clone, like the drop ship and the APC. I think I had one, and some of the anything that had Obi-Wan Kenobi in it. Mm-hmm. I picked up. I still have a lot of like one project I want to do in the future is like go through my giant crates, because I kept all of the instruction booklets and just like go through and try to put the pieces for the kits back together and maybe get some clone stuff. Maybe I'll make that a project for like, I don't know, over winter and share some pictures online or something. So the Legos are what brought you to also the Imperial stuff.
I've always been a sucker for a smart uniform. The Imperials have the best looking uniforms.
It's strange how the bad guys always seem to look the coolest,
I think it's because of the German army in World War II, where the SS had their uniforms designed by a
Hugo Boss,
world-renowned designer.
Yeah,
and so their uniforms always look smarter. Like I used to also collect the 12-inch GI Joes, not actually GI Joe, entirely different company. Anytime I saw German figures or uniform kits on the shelves at Toys R Us, I always picked those up because they just looked cooler. Mm-hmm. Not because I support their ideology, but their uniforms just look cooler.
And that's fair.
They look like a sci-fi army, and I think that's probably why the designers in Star Wars chose to use those military uniforms. And if I remember my Imperial uniform history correct, the uniforms they used in A New Hope were ones used or based on uniforms from a different World War II or World War I movie that the Germans were wearing, like those uniforms.
That's pretty cool. And we do know, I know thanks to your insight into such costuming and things, that there is a lot of implementation of not just German uniforms, but various military uniforms from different time periods throughout Star Wars. That's a really unique sort of thing that I very much enjoy, because they take the old sort of like modern day military outfits and make them seem sci-fi, which is really cool. On that subject, so the uniforms are really cool. Do you have any particular favorite Imperial characters?
Veers, General Maximilian Veers, in the movies. I think he's the only Imperial officer not to mess up and get killed.
I think that might be true.
Because it's not his fault he wasn't able to completely wipe out the rebels on Hoth. That was... who was it? Admiral Ozzel?
Ozzel, yeah.
Who jumped out of hyperspace too close to the asteroid field, kind of gave away their position, so Veers had to go down there and wipe it up with boxes on legs. Also because he has a cool uniform, which is very World War I German trench warfare inspired. I've always liked the idea of the Imperial Army, like not the stormtroopers who are supposed to be like the elite or whatever. I like to think of them as like the stormtroopers as like the U.S. Marines are specialized, like they're the fighting force on board the Navy ships, sort of thing. Imperial Army hasn't really gotten any love until Solo, where we finally got to see them running around, which I was so happy. I just wish that was longer. But I understand we had a lot of story to move through pretty quickly.
I think my favorite part of that entire sequence is when they had the Imperial commissar screaming, your empire needs you, and then immediately gets blown up by mortar fire.
Well, to go back to Warhammer 40k, I always loved the Imperial Guard units, which were in Warhammer. There are the Space Marines, which are these giant 8-foot tall, genetically engineered super soldiers in giant chunky armor, which you could kind of relate to stormtroopers.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And then you have the Imperial Guard, who have the simplest armor possible and like the weakest laser rifles that you could possibly get. The Space Marines are specialized and small elite units. The Imperial Guard is, let's send 1 billion soldiers at this defensive fortress. If we lose 1 billion soldiers, that is a perfectly fine amount. In the 40k universe, the entire galaxy is populated by hundreds of billions of humans, so 1 billion Imperial troops is, it's like nothing to them.
Right.
Also, they have commissars that did the same thing, like in Solo, and I love the commissars. I've realized that what I think I like about the Imperial Guard or the Imperial Army in Star Wars is I've always had a love for the history of World War II, and kind of over-exaggerating it. Like, again, I like the Nazis' uniforms, the weapons, their technology. I don't care for their ideals. Same thing with the Soviets.
I can confirm that John is neither a Nazi nor a communist.
True. But I also like the Russians, their style, and how they had, propaganda officers in the lines to encourage loyalty and stuff. So I always thought that those sort of things were kind of like an interesting thing.
Right. So besides,
we're talking about officers. That's right.
We'll
jump back.
Besides General Veers,
and then of course Thrawn, who is the best. He's blue. He's an alien. Doesn't let that bother him. doesn't let other people being bothered by him being a blue alien.
See, the interesting thing about Thrawn, for me, is that I feel like, especially after reading the new canon Thrawn novel and seeing how he's behaved in Rebels, is that if the ideology of Thrawn was permeated kind of throughout the Empire itself, I think it would be like we would have a much harder time calling them just the straight up bad guys, because he has this philosophy of we're on opposite sides. I'm going to respect you in the way that I conduct business, and I'm going to offer you chances to surrender and end things peacefully, but if you don't, I'm going to crush you. And I think that that's kind of when we're looking at war and, kind of the devastation that comes with that sort of attitude of that I have to do this, but I'm still going to put honor in it. Is definitely a desirable characteristic in the hellish landscape of war.
Yeah.
Thrawn, for me, I consider him the best Imperial. Now I haven't read Heir to the Empire in a really long time. I don't really remember the differences between the characters. If I'm remembering correctly, he was a little bit more ruthless.
Yeah.
In Heir to the Empire, but canon iteration of Thrawn. Favorite Imperial. Yeah.
Unlike the other Imperial officers we see who are kind of brainwashed into the ideology of the Imperium, or I know it's not called the Imperium.
The Empire.
40K, the Empire. And the new Thrawn books. That's what I'm trying to say. And the first new Thrawn book, man, that's going to be annoying.
The canon Thrawn book.
Thank you. Yeah. It didn't seem like he was joining the Empire because he believed in its ideology. He was joining the Empire because he knew, and they had the ability and the hardware and the military might to help him with this conflict in the unknown regions that he knew was coming. So it kind of seemed like he was I'll go along with your Empire thing because I can figure out how to work this, because at some point this military force, this government, is going to have to be the front line of this upcoming conflict of what he knows is in the unknown regions.
And an interesting point on that, this if we go back into kind of Legends canon, this is not the first time that the Chiss Ascendancy has done such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever played the MMO, I know you did, because you named a ridiculous character after me.
Yep.
The MMO, Star Wars: The Old Republic, the Chiss are allied with the Sith Empire, and Timothy Zahn actually helped write a story campaign around going into Chiss space, which is kind of interesting. And it has always kind of seemed that the Chiss never join anything because of the ideals. They always seem to join outside conflicts because of the
they're
benefit.
normally pretty isolationist.
Right.
And then, and their alliances are only there because they serve to give the Chiss Ascendancy an advantage.
Right.
Like at the end of the Thrawn novel, he sends his like lieutenant or whatever out.
Yep.
To the Chiss Ascendancy.
Eli Vanto. I liked that character a lot more than I thought I was going to. In the book,
he was just trying to get by.
Yep, and he got by just fine. Any other Imperial characters stick out to you?
Those are my two favorite ones. I mean, there's a lot of named characters that are out there.
Sure.
That don't get a lot of screen time or a lot of attention. Like, Veers really doesn't get all that much attention.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's one of my favorite Twitter accounts is at Veers Watch, where the guy just goes through all media that comes out of Star Wars and lets us know if General Veers is in it or not.
Shout out to Veers Watch.
Yeah, great channel. Great Twitter.
Great
whatever.
Twitter. Great Twitter. I can't speak words today.
Storm Strudel.
Storm Strudel.
But luckily, with the new movies we've gotten a couple more prominent, more story-centered Imperials like Krennic.
Krennic.
It's kind of cool, even though he's not technically military.
I think he is.
Civilian.
He's a military director.
Yeah.
Like
That's why
that's what Tarkin calls him.
Yeah, Tarkin's like, you can't be military. He's like, what? I'm almost going to destroy this moon.
Yeah. It's interesting. The comics have kind of fleshed out some of those named characters too. Like, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He's the grumpy admiral in the original Star Wars who is like, hey, we shouldn't put all our resources into this battle station. The guy that's arguing with the dude that Vader chokes out. Yeah, Mahdi. Mahdi gets fleshed out because he ends up like, and I'm not caught up on the Vader comic, but he ends up like being put in charge of Vader after the destruction of the first Death Star, and the Emperor's like, hey, yeah, you done goofed, so your punishment is you have to listen to Mahdi.
The other like ones that do Imperial officers that do get a little bit of recognition, like Tarkin in the movies, I don't really care for him. He's just kind of like in charge and pompous. Like he is your like the stereotypical Imperial.
Right.
That's fine. But it's kind of like bland. It's that's why Thrawn is cool, because he's not your stereotypical. Veers doesn't mess up, so I guess that makes him good. I like Tarkin in the Clone Wars. I loved Yularen in the Clone Wars.
Yularen's awesome.
Yularen doesn't really do much in anything else because he
makes an appearance on the Thrawn novel.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
In the first one?
Yeah, you ignored all of the sections that didn't have Thrawn in them.
I listened to it on audiobook when I had a job where I was traveling nonstop, so I really wasn't paying attention when I was listening
together.
to it.
Yeah,
Yularen, like, because he's a captain in the.
He's an admiral.
He's an admiral. Yeah, that's right. He's an admiral in
the
Clone Wars, and then I think in canon he retires after the New Order is started, comes back to ISB and gets a
colonel position,
colonel rank. Yeah.
Yep. And technically, he's on screen in A New Hope.
A New Hope. Yeah, he's in the boardroom.
Yeah, he's the guy in the white uniform. And then the other cool thing there is that they're theorizing that the one empty chair in the Death Star throne room is supposed to be Krennic's, which makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense.
Which I like that. I really enjoy that. So, what about the big man himself, Uncle Pappy, Emperor Palpatonio?
So, as you know, what I love about Emperor Palpatine is that I can use him to annoy you as much as possible by calling him Uncle Pappy, by reminding you that before the Empire started, the the galaxy was at a state of war.
That he started.
No, Darth Sidious started it.
They're the same person.
What? That's ridiculous.
Oh my god.
A Sith
Lord?
But Uncle Pappy, like, my favorite villains are the villains that genuinely think that they're doing the right thing. Palpatine is not one of those villains.
No, he is not.
Palpatine knows exactly what he's doing. He consolidates his own power by starting a war with himself. We really don't see... I don't think we really see all that much about what the Empire, or what he has done to the galaxy. We only ever see really the Outer Rim and kind of the places that are out of the reach, really, of like a firm grasp of the Empire. We see this in a lot of sci-fi, like in Firefly. That whole show basically takes place on the Outer Rims, like the
Outer Rim equivalent.
Yeah, I can't remember what they call it. There's like the central planets that seem to be like this wonderful utopia that from everyone on the outside is like, no, it's a corporate run, mega corporation. And so what we see in Star Wars of the Empire is what they're doing to like the places that they can barely hold on to. What I've always found interesting is that there's all those stormtroopers on Tatooine. Does that mean that they just dropped a ship down there, or do they have an alliance with the Hutts? Because I feel like the Hutts wouldn't tolerate an Imperial presence there.
They do have an alliance with the Hutts, actually.
Okay.
It is established in the Vader comic and the Star Wars main canon comic.
Okay.
Essentially, the Empire is starved for resources, because of the Death Star project, essentially, and trying to, not only that, but just trying to maintain this gigantic fleet and maintain the military and continue to grow it. They're starved for resources, and the rebels at this point are like poking a lot of holes in their production. That's been like their main targets. So Vader is sent to make a deal with Jabba the Hutt, and the quote unquote deal is, you're going to give us supplies, and we're going to pay you for them what we think is reasonable, and that's what's going to happen. And Jabba tries to be Jabba about it, but at the end of the day, Vader gets his way. So yes, they actually do have an alliance with the Hutts.
Yeah, that always confused me, like when Return of the Jedi rolled around, like, oh, this is Hutt-controlled space. Like, well, were those elite troopers just down there, just hanging out around on Dewbacks? So...
I like Dewbacks.
Me too.
I used to always like say their name like they were a Pokemon when I was a kid. I'd be like, it's a Dewback. Dewback, back. I can't. I don't know why that's relevant. It just felt like sharing. So the fact that the Emperor himself is Darth Sidious and a Sith Lord, I think you brought up a really good point in that, with the central kind of the core worlds being relatively safe and controlled, and even though there's a lot of stuff that going on behind the scenes, it's not the face, and that's one of the reasons why the Empire itself, like, the Emperor is evil. The Empire itself, the idea of the Empire, is not all that far-fetched,
right?
Especially when we put it in the context of the Clone Wars, and like Palpatine knows that. He knows that he's set this up so that the Empire is sympathetic. So it's one of the reasons why I think they've become popular. So the Empire are the bad guys, but again, they're easier to get behind than most classic enemies. Is there anything else you think kind of attributes to that?
I think within fandom, it's sometimes fun to root for the bad guy for funsies.
I don't understand.
Like, we'll throw in some of that Marvel humor in there. I love shouting "Hail Hydra" at people. You know what I think it is I'm just like anybody that has a German, like a World War II German aesthetic. I love Hydra. I love Cobra. I don't know. Maybe it's because when you're like, yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's one of those things too. Like, the reason why we love whenever a new Stormtrooper comes out,
mm-hmm.
is they look cool, you know? And it that plays a big part as well. I mean, the 501st Legion wouldn't exist without the fact that they were cool enough that people wanted to dress up as Stormtroopers and Imperials. Like, I love the Royal Guards. I think they're kind of a cool thing. And, you know, all the Stormtrooper armor and all the different ones.
I think that because a lot of the Imperial armor is, like, fully body enclosing,
mm-hmm.
It's easier for anybody to get into it. Like, anybody could be a Stormtrooper. Anybody could be a Royal Guard. Anybody could be an Imperial pilot. Not everybody can be, or can dress up like Han Solo, or dress up like Luke.
Yeah, that's true.
The Rebel forces, up until this point, have just been mostly the named characters.
Right.
And then you have the Rebel Fleet Troopers, who you see for a little bit at the beginning of A New Hope,
mm-hmm.
and then, I guess, the very tail end of Rogue One, just getting chopped up. And
got the Endor forces.
Yeah, the Endor forces. And I don't think anyone really dresses up as the Hoth soldiers, just because I think
it's hot.
Way too hot to wear winter clothing. and those uniforms are cool.
Yeah,
like all their uniforms are cool. I mean, I have a Scarif Rebel costume that I made solely because I already had one of the steel pot helmets that they modified, because I was going to do a
He's
alien
lying.
Colonial Marines costume.
Secretly, he likes the Empire the Rebels.
That helmet I have had since I was 10.
No, we do we have pictures of your Scarif on the site? If not, we'll throw them up there.
Yeah, I have a couple.
Yeah,
that was a super easy build. Like, them and the Rebel Fleet Troopers are a pretty simple build. Just like you have a weird helmet for both of them.
Well, and to your point, you know, like, anybody can be in the Imperial forces. I'm the most, like, light side cheering good guy, like, go good guys person. Mm-hmm. The first costume that I requisitioned from you was a Imperial officer uniform, because you can fat bearded dude, he can be an Imperial officer, you know? It's interesting point. Moving on from that, would you be interested in story scenarios where the Empire is ultimately victorious in whatever their sort of...
I can only see that sort of thing happening in a novel or in a show or something. I don't think it would ever be appropriate for a movie.
We kind of got it in Rogue One.
They were able to complete their mission and get the plans to the rebellion.
Right.
I think the theme and the story of Star Wars, you can't have the bad guys ultimately win. Even if it's, like, at the end of Empire... There's an ant crawling on my microphone. Apologies. At the end of Empire, the Boba Fett as Han, they've wiped out the base on Hoth, but the rebellion is still there and still going strong. Same thing at the end of Last Jedi. There's 20 of them left or whatever after the First Order wipes out their base and ships, but they still have that hope. And I don't think you could do a movie that ends with there not being any hope, because that's not Star Wars. But you could do that in a show. That's a season cliffhanger. You know, that's a season finale, and then the next story arc is how they bounce back from that. Or in a comic, they could do the same thing. I mean, they already have Darth Vader is a comic about a villain. Right. And him being successful in being a villain.
Very iconic villain.
So yeah, I would love to see that. Though, again, I'd love to see it more in a show. Most things in Star Wars I'd rather see in a long form type thing.
Yeah, for sure. So you did mention The Last Jedi. The Empire itself inspired a number of different organizations throughout both Legends and canon. So I want to get your opinion on the Imperial Remnant and the Fel Empire, but first, I know that the new movies haven't really caught your attention. Not caught your attention, but haven't really affected you the same way that the originals have. So, what do you think about the First Order as the Empire's successor, and why do you think it hasn't given you the same investment as the original Empire?
It doesn't have to do with the organization itself. I haven't really latched onto it just because, as we've mentioned this entire episode, I the Age of Rebellion Empire fan. The First Order is kind of self-admittedly a ripoff. No, I don't want to say ripoff, but similar term. I'm not going to try to remember what it is because there's to be a lot of dead air of the Empire. I mean, they use triangle ships. They still use TIE fighters. They have stormtroopers. They build giant hurt balls that shoot lasers.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the First Order from the canon sources that I remember is made up of Imperial Remnant. Oh, he started by Imperial Remnant forces, so that's what they know. It's just I'm not as invested in the sequel trilogy. It's not that I don't like them. I very much enjoy them. It's just the stories, the villains, they haven't really made as much of an impact as the other ones have.
Do you think
that it might just be a thing of I don't think I was a huge Empire fanboy when I was a kid. Maybe as the story wraps up, we get more media. Maybe that will change when we find out a little bit more about the First Order. Because The Force Awakens, I forgot the name of it. The Force Awakens, like, we get a small glimpse of who the First Order are and what they're about. In The Last Jedi, which takes place over the course of like 8 hours or 10 hours or something like that, we really don't get much more about what the First Order is, because that's not what that movie was about. It was more about Rey and her training with Kylo. So I'm interested to see what they're going to do in 9 with the First Order. If the Republic is gone and they are the only faction that remains, it'll be interesting to see how they are ruling the galaxy.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I haven't really been. I've been purposely distancing. That's not even a word. Stormtroopering. I've been stormstrudling away from the hype culture and the speculation stuff that's been going on right now. But one thing that's kind of been permeating the whole thing right now is this rumor that when we open in episode 9, the First Order is actually like doing a good job, and it kind of goes back to that original Empire theme where if you looked at the core worlds and how the Empire was actually working and running, wasn't a terrible thing.
Well, like I like to think of like how turn of the century countries were, where America, Germany, France, England, they're doing great within the country. They were going outside the country to get resources, all their territories, French Indochina, the whole like Japanese and Korea and China taking resources, Germany and Africa and wherever else Germany was. I'm sure they had some stuff in the Pacific, and then the U.S. had protectorates and territories all over the world that we are taking resources from. And so that's how I kind of see it, is when you're living within the country, you don't really see the problems that are going on outside.
It's a very nuanced look at the Empire, not something that I really would have considered.
I'm sure like in Coruscant and Corellia, it's probably fine.
Yeah.
Their needs are probably met at the expense of the Outer Rim colonies that are, because of their Outer Rim status, they're not as developed, so the resources are more for the taking than like. I doubt there's a lot of resource gathering on Corellia or on Coruscant.
Yeah, that's a real interesting point. I'm looking at things in a new perspective now. After that particular thing, how about the Imperial Remnant and its successor, the Fel Empire in Legends?
So, I knew nothing about the Fel Empire until you loaned me the Legacy comics or the.
Yep, Legacy.
Oh, it's so weird because it's the Legends. It's a legend story called Legacy.
Right.
Whew. It goes. Star Wars messed up 13 books for me, or however many. And I read those and I enjoyed them. And then we played a Star Wars RPG using it was the Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, it was the Wizards of the Coast D20
Saga
system.
Edition.
Yep.
That took place during that time.
Yep, I read that one.
And I think this is when I really became an Imperial fanboy, playing the Duros Imperial intelligence officer Sleeps Quasar Blast, whose backstory was his father served on the flagship of what's Fell's dad's name?
His
not Jagged Fell.
Yeah,
Roan Fell.
Roan
Fell was the TIE fighter pilot.
One of those.
One of the Fells.
Yeah.
And so like I loved his dumb backstory. Is that even though he was a Duros serving on an Imperial ship, this particular Fel, whoever it was, because I can't remember, since neither of us can remember.
Yeah.
She always showed him respect, and so he always like respected him. And then like when the Fel Imperium became a thing, like his whole family was just like diehard loyalists and stuff like that.
So for those who aren't familiar with the Fel Empire and what it is, in the Legends canon, hundreds of years after the actions of the movies and some of the Legends canon stuff, the Imperial remnant, the Jedi and the new Jedi Order and the New Republic had to put aside their differences and help defend against an extra galactic enemy known as the Yuuzhan Vong. And once that entire conflict ended, three major ruling factions came out of the galaxy that kind of had this uneasy peace. And it was the Jedi Order who broke away from the New Republic because they aren't going to play by your rules, man. The Galactic Alliance, which is what the New Republic was, and then they decided, no, we're going to do this differently and not just copy the Old Republic because it didn't work out so well for them. And the Fel Imperium, where basically the tenets of the Empire, all the stuff we've been talking about today, where, hey, the Empire kind of works in these specific spheres, were consolidated, and a new empire was formed under Imperial Remnant hero, who essentially all the good ideas of Palpatine without all of the evil, like an actual like honorable dude, and then passed down among the line, where eventually there is a Force user in the time period we're talking about, a Force user on the throne.
One of the things I really liked about the organization of the Fel Empire is that the Fel Empire had their own Jedi Order. They weren't called Jedis.
The Imperial Knights.
And their number one task was that if the Emperor fell, or the Emperor turned to the dark side...
If the Emperor fell?
Yeah, exactly. If fell, then their job was to take him out with extreme prejudice.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a cool, like, kind of like balance of having the Imperial doctrine, but also welcoming Force users into that.
They're actually my favorite Force organization outside of the Jedi. I love them because they, unlike the Jedi who serve the Force above all else, they serve the Empire above all else. They put the well-being of the Empire above anything else, and they do follow the light side. Like, they're not Sith or anything like that, but they're not afraid of, like, they could be considered a quote-unquote gray organization, which I hate that term, and I because it's got like 8,000 definitions that
I think
nobody can agree on. Yeah, any final wrap-up thoughts about the Empire?
What I love most about the Empire is how easily I can use it to annoy you. That might be my favorite thing about it.
As we've discussed previously, you are a troll.
It's true. I learned this. I learned this after Last Jedi came out, and the more people hated it, the more I loved it. Which is terrible. I'm looking forward to the new trilogies that have been announced with Ryan and Favreau and the
Game of Thrones guys.
Yeah, I can never pronounce their names right. It's
kind
of like Phil Miller.
Yeah, Miller and Lord.
Yeah, I always say Phil Miller.
Yeah. It's not their name.
So I'm excited to see what they do, if they do anything in that time area. I mean, there's rumors of what Favreau's doing about Mandalore, which would be cool, because Mandalore gets a lot of love, but who knows what he's doing. Show about Wookiees would be cool, except it's probably all going to be in Sherrywook, and I don't want to read subtitles. I've watched the Holiday Special.
They didn't have subtitles in the Holiday Special. That was one of the problems. Listeners will know I tend to, I'll have an initial knee-jerk reaction to something, and I think a lot of people in the fandom are like this. We'll have our initial knee-jerk reactions to whatever news or announcement comes out. And then once we have time to like digest it, we'll kind of come back and have a more nuanced opinion. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I love about doing this podcast is that like I can have those knee-jerk reactions and the nuanced opinions at the same time. Like so we get a chance to talk about it and explore it.
When Solo was announced, you mentioned several times that you were like bleh.
Yeah,
and then what
absolutely.
you want an Obi-Wan film. Where I'm in the boat of you for Solo, where I was like I don't really need a Solo film. Mm-hmm. But if they're going to do it, that's fine. I don't want an Obi-Wan film. Because I don't... Like, you see a story where I just see someone sitting in a desert.
Right. Well, and to be perfectly fair to you on this one, I don't need an Obi-Wan film either. Like, I don't... Honestly, I don't think it's a good idea to make it. I think it's a terrible idea. But it's still my favorite character, so I want it to happen.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, maybe if they... I wouldn't mind having, like, that... explored like in the main comic we've kind of been getting some of those side stories with Obi-Wan and I've been enjoying those kind of just like flashback sequences, like single issue flashback sequences, and those are kind of cool, talking about like how he's watching over Luke and sort of the stuff that he's been doing in the desert. I wouldn't mind seeing like, you know, I don't know how much money they'd have to take a dump truck full of cash and back it into Ewan McGregor's garage, but if they could get him for like some of the Jon Favreau like TV stuff, that'd be really cool. Be really cool. I think that would be
assuming that the Favreau thing has anything to do with Mandalorian.
Right.
This is just like the common rumor.
Yeah. But like I think that a mini-series type appearance, couple episodes in a TV show, would work better for that concept than a whole movie. I
think I think that any of the Star Wars stories movies should be straight like either small mini-series or straight to Netflix type things or straight to the streaming service type things.
Right. Which, get ready to pay for that.
I'm excited.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that wraps up our conversation about the Empire. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and you mentioned some stuff that has gotten me thinking about it in new directions. So good job. We did get a piece of mail, John.
No way.
Yeah.
Is it from Tim?
It's from Tim.
No way.
He probably is our most involved fan. You can be too. Be sure to send us your questions or comments to hothpod@gmail.com, which is what Tim did. Tim said, "Hello. What do you think will happen with the novels and comic books after the end of the Skywalker saga? Previously, the extra material filled in gaps of the films, other than Shadows of the Empire, which was not able to spark a film. Do you think the comics or novels will ever precede films as subject matter in the future, as with Marvel material, or will they forever be used only for telling backstory or filling in the gaps of a film-oriented timeline? Cheers, Tim." So, what I think Tim is saying there...
Will we ever have an expanded universe type situation?
Well, I think what he's asking is, the expanded universe that we're going to get, is any of that going to influence on-screen media, or is it just going to be used as filler as it was in the previous extended universe?
I don't think a lot of it was used as filler for the trilogies. The Heir to the Empire didn't set up anything in the next film.
Right,
Jedi Search didn't.
I think that's his point. Like it was just something that existed on the edges, kind of outside, and just filling in different time periods. Whereas, I think what he's asking is, do we think new stuff will set that up?
I think we need to wait for the sequel trilogy to end, and then there'll be a lot more freedom to do stuff. With like when they wiped out the EU, or they legendized it. To me, they did that because they didn't want to. Well, the easiest way to say is they didn't want to walk on anyone else's feet when they're creating the new trilogy. I'm sure the real thing is they didn't want to pay anybody for existing stories when they use them.
Sure.
I feel like right now there's probably a mandate that's out there saying don't do anything in this specific time era because we haven't figured out where it's going yet.
Right.
So I think until the sequel trilogy movies end, we're not going to really see anything that sets up its own story that will affect, like, it won't affect Episode 9.
Right.
We're going to get filler stuff, like Resistance takes place before A New Hope. Why can't I remember Force Awakens?
I don't know.
I can't remember it. We don't really have anything in that time period, and then that has a definite end period. Kind of like Rogue One, it's backed up against A New Hope. Rebels is backed up against Rogue One, sort of thing. And we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, the expanded universe didn't really get running until many years after Return of the Jedi came out, when there was kind of like a dead period, and then we started getting new novels and new comics, and they started going back in time with like the Tales of the Jedi novels, which has always been kind of an interesting thing with the Old Republic stuff, is that it's so far in the past that they kind of just like do whatever, and it's like whatever. A couple thousand years passed and everyone forgot about it.
Right.
Like, what's going on with the Starforge? I missed that thing. Did it blow up? I don't remember.
Yeah, they blew that up. They done blowed it up, and then parts of it were used to, like, they took like shrapnel from it and infused it into warriors. I don't know. It's weird.
Cool.
Yeah. I agree with you. I don't think that we're going to get as extensive of an EU sort of like situation until years after. And the other thing that's weird about that is that because Disney owns it now, and we're going to be getting all of these side projects, you know, we're getting on-screen media in the EU. So I don't feel like they would have a book or a comic or anything like that they would turn into on-screen media at a later date, just because if they wanted to tell a story on screen, now they can just tell a story on screen, you know, because they have the animation department, they have the live action, they have the money to do it.
I'm just reading Tim's question again, and one last thing I want to interject in.
Yeah,
there.
Please do that.
Specifically, do you think the comics or novels will ever precede films as subject matter? I don't. It's just because those extra the comics, the shows and stuff, I think that they are specifically designed there to fill those gaps in, to add a little bit of extra story without being a integral part. Like, you can watch the original trilogy and be totally fine if you never watch Rebels or watch Rogue One, or pick up any of the comics that took place during that time. Same thing with the prequels. You don't need to watch the Clone Wars series to understand what happens between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. I don't think Disney or anybody else who holds a license to any franchise would make a story that is as important as those movies, that's its own standalone thing. Like, Tim, you mentioned Shadows of the Empire, and, you know, they went all out on that. They had a soundtrack for a novel, they had a video game for that novel, and it didn't take off. People weren't interested in a story that didn't involve those main characters as much, even though I think Luke blows up a palace with a thermal detonator. Thermal detonators, man. This universe needs to figure out what the power of a thermal detonator is.
I am fully convinced after watching everything that every explosive is just contained in that same style of housing, and that they're all like kind of different, because we've seen the thermal detonator casing used as thermal detonators. We've seen the thermal detonator casing used as just a hand grenade explosion. We've seen them used as ion explosions. We've seen half of them used as like explosive charges. Hey, story group, get on that. Get back to us.
So to wrap that up, Tim, you know, I don't think any of those. I highly doubt any of the extra material will ever be used to supersede the main films until we are so far away from those films. If they cancel all the upcoming, the Rian Johnson, the Favreau, the Game of Thrones guys, can't pronounce their names.
Can't pronounce them or can't remember them.
Can't, you both. Unless they cancel those things, I don't think we'll see anything
substantial.
Thank you. Yeah, substantial coming out of those books that aren't somehow tied to something that's happening in the movies.
And it's not to say that there isn't anything like substantial that doesn't add to the already existing stuff. Like I feel like the extended universe, both canon and Legends, just adds so much to my Star Wars experience. But I agree with you in that they wouldn't make a side story so important as to that it would affect the main story arcs. Which they kind of did in Solo, but they can get away with that because it's Solo. It's a side film, you know?
Yeah, and again, like Solo, you don't need to watch that to understand the movies.
Right.
Or if you don't watch Empire,
the core movies, yeah.
Return of the Jedi is not going to make sense. If you don't watch Phantom Menace, that might be a bad example. If you don't watch,
well, if as we saw with our experiment with our friend Danielle, who we showed everything in episodic order, like each trilogy is self-contained. You can watch 3 and still get a good sense of the story, and then you can watch the original trilogy, and it doesn't matter which ones you watch. You can get a sense, a beginning and an end, even if they tie into each other. Which, listening to it in my brain, doesn't make a ton of sense. But you know what I mean. So, Tim, if we've completely butchered your question, feel free to tell us that we've done so and tell us how we've screwed it up. If we haven't, thank you for sending in. If you would like to leave a comment or a question or a rant, rave, or any other form of communication, you can find us through email, hothpod@gmail.com, or you can tweet at us on the Twitters, @hothpod. I am also now on the Twitter on a separate account, @hothpodian, if you want to shout words directly at my brain holes. You can also find any of our opinion articles, John's costume walkthroughs, photos of any projects we're doing, and all of our episodes at HothTopicsPodcast.com. John, I think that's about everything for today.
Sweet.
Yeah. Awesome.
We did it. Congratulations, us.
Hail the Empire.
Yeah, hail Hydra. Hail Cobra.
I've been Ian.
I was hit by a bus last week.
He was, and you should probably tell people you're fine, because we mentioned that in the Twitter account, and there was some concern.
I cleared it up, and I mentioned that my car had, I had recently I had masterworked my car with +2 DR bus armor.
Oh, okay, good.
Which, unfortunately, the bus, it rolled a critical hit, and, it destroyed the armor, because it exceeded the DR value.
That's a jokey joke for our tabletop playing friends. That was John. Thank you very much, everybody. We will see you next time. Woo! John, based on this story you're telling me, I don't think you're a fan of the Empire. I just think you're a fan of boxes.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm a fan of Legos and boxes. Quick side story. They probably still do these, but I used to go to these Lego building competitions at a local mall where you pay a fee, and they just give you a box of random Legos, and then you build something, and then judges would come around and give out prizes for who made the coolest whatever. I never saw these as a chance to build the coolest whatever. I saw these as opportunities to get the coolest Lego bricks I could and just stick them to things, and because you got to take those Legos home. I discovered that if I made boxes and just filled them with loose parts, that I could get home with even more stuff, even though it was clearly against the rules.
Cool, and Legos.
Warhammer 40k, I made an army that used the equivalent of an APC, the Rhino, which is also known just as metal boxes.
Right.
So, yeah.
Big fan of boxes.
I'm a lot of revelation today.
Yeah.
Boxolation?
We're unpacking a lot of things.
It's good.
Yeah. But I think we should shelve this for now.
I know you're trying to do a pun with shelf, but I'm not feeling it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean,
it's a little square.
You put other things on.
It's still not good.